Hello, my fellow webheads. It's your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco, and I am with you, which means it's time for more Amazing Spider-Man. Today, we're going to look at Amazing Spider-Man number 68. We've just for reference, this is a new story. We've just come off of the end of a Mysterio storyline, the return of Mysterio. And of course, our last episode, we just looked at Spider-Man Annual number 5. So now we're back to kicking off a new story arc. Of course, at this point, I always want to thank everybody for helping to support the channel. Thank you for everybody that has been clicking that subscribe button. It is absolutely fantastic. And of course, all the support is 100% on you. So thank you, everybody who has been not only following the videos, but anybody who's been sharing it, anybody who's been helping to get the word out about these videos. Thank you so much for all of that. Now, if you're new here, let me just tell you, this is not the only series that we do. I have a series here on the channel where we review these Spider-Man comics going all the way back to Amazing Fantasy 15. I have also started 2 other series, one following the Incredible Hulk and a third one following the X-Men. Again, starting at the beginning of each of those series. So if you're not familiar, you may want to check those out. You may want to go to the playlist and check out any of the previous episodes as well. We've got quite a few now to look at. And I do want to tell you again, if you're new, you really want to hit that subscribe button. And here's why. Number one, it is 100% free. It costs you nothing to click subscribe, but it does help out me and the channel quite a bit. The other thing is when you hit subscribe, you are going to be placed into automatically a completely free, no purchase necessary drawing to win free artwork. So that said, let me show you what I'm talking about here. So as an artist, I have done work to celebrate the various series here on the channel. So this is an Amazing Spider-Man piece that I did. This is going to be given away to one lucky subscriber. We've got the Incredible Hulk here for that other series that I mentioned, the Incredible Hulk. So we're going to be giving this to a lucky subscriber as well. And then we have the X-Men in their original school uniforms. Again, also free to a lucky subscriber. When we hit 1,000 subscribers, that's when I'm going to go ahead and pick a winner or winners, and I will be shipping out that art to whomever we pick at random. So by clicking that subscribe button, you are going to be immediately put into the drawing for that free artwork. And then let me take a quick moment just to let you know there are 3 more of these video series that are coming. I'm working on them, but I've got the artwork done. So let me show you the artwork that we've got and kind of preview what those other series are going to be. So we're going to start out here. We've got the Avengers with the original comic book Avengers lineup. That you've got Iron Man, Thor, the Hulk, Wasp, and Ant-Man. So you could win this piece as well. That is out there. Another series we're going to be doing is, of course, Captain America. Now, this one does not go back to Captain America number 1, which, of course, is the World War II era. This is more the modern Marvel era where they bring him back. But we're going to be starting with those comics as well. And then the last one we have... the last is the first. It's Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four. This is the series that kicked off what we today think of as the modern Marvel universe. And so we are going to be covering the Fantastic Four, going all the way back to Fantastic Four number 1. So that's more artwork that you could win, again, just by clicking that subscribe button for free. So please go ahead and hit that. And that said, out of the way, let's jump into the comic and let's talk about this issue. So here's the cover to Amazing Spider-Man number 68. And right off the bat, before we get into the art, I just want to talk a little bit about the issue and some of the obvious plot that's happening in this issue. So this issue takes place, or is published in 1968. And for the most part, Marvel... I think maybe DC does a little better job of it, but Marvel tries, for the most part, to make their comics and their characters, what is the term that we use is evergreen, meaning they can go on forever. They're not tied to a specific time, a specific date. But at the same time, Stan Lee was smart enough to understand that, as opposed to DC Comics, his characters lived in a real world. They lived in New York City for the most part, which, so readers understood New York. I'm sure a lot of readers were from New York. And so he had to reflect what was going on in the real world to some degree. So in 1968, if you're not familiar, there was a lot of protesting going on in college campuses around the country. It was primarily one of the biggest places where you would find protests. And at the time, there was a lot of subject matter of, there was a lot of equal rights protests. There were a lot of anti-war protests at that time. That's not what's happening here in the comic. The protest that's going on here at Empire State University has to do with student housing. So not as politically charged as what was really going on at the times, but I do applaud Stan for recognizing like this is a real thing. And our heroes have to deal with real things. And so, therefore, it was included as part of the storyline. So, other than that, I'm not going to cover it too much. There are some things in here where, again, this is a comic of the times, and we have to recognize sometimes that's the fact. Things that were relevant or were acceptable in 1968 are not necessarily acceptable or understood in 2026 as of the recording of this video. So we will find things. There are some topics in here that have to do with race, and we're going to kind of gloss over that because this series is not about the politics of the story. This series is about the artwork, and that's going to be primarily the focus here of this video going forward. So just wanted to clear that up with everybody. Of course, if you want to engage in dialogue in the comments of the video about the protesting and stuff like that and the plot of the story, you're certainly welcome to do so. As long as it's respectful, we'll go ahead and do that. But for the most part, again, we're going to focus on the art. So that's what we're about to start here. We're going to talk about this cover. It's interesting that it doesn't really feature the main villain. So spoilers, though we know we're about to go over it. If you haven't read this one already, the Kingpin is returning as the major villain of this issue, and yet it doesn't feature obviously the Kingpin on the cover. So that's kind of an interesting choice. It is nice from a composition standpoint. You have your large main figure, large central figure, bright color, which really attracts our eye. And Spidey's body takes us from the Amazing Spider-Man title all the way down into this great crowd piece. Overall, the whole thing, of course, is drawn by John Romita, who is the series artist, and he's done a really nice job of putting together a comic where on the shelf we are going to see that big bright Spidey and going to want to pick it up. It does help as well. Good choice to have it on a white background. Your figures, especially when they're bright like Spidey, reds, yellows, bright blues, are going to show up much better on a white background than if we had some sort of color in the sky. So perfect choice there. Good cover, not the drama that we necessarily like in terms of Spidey with villains, but certainly telling the story here. As always, this is a scanned PDF copy of the comic. In 2004, Marvel got their hands on all of the Spidey comics to that date and scanned them and put them onto, at that time it was CD-ROMs, eventually DVDs, so that you could view them as we're doing here on your computer at home. So it's really good stuff. I love it because you do get all the original ads. You get the artwork as it was original. There's no cleanup. There's no digital fixes, anything like that. And the way that it's laid out with page turns, interacting with ads and things like that really does give us the best sense of exactly how this comic looked when it was purchased in 1968. So the art team is similar here. What we've seen for most recently, we've got Stan the Man writing the comic, John Romita doing the art, or we'll say pencils, and Jim Mooney as an inker. Now, we've talked about this some before, but if you're new, the credits do matter in comics. in fact, it can change the pay scale of what somebody is paid. So if I'm credited as a penciler, that means that I am doing all of the artwork in pencil to a complete level that an inker can come in and then go over those pencils with black ink. But everything is there. All the background is drawn, all the figures, all the shading that I want, it's all drawn in there. It's complete. If I do layouts, which we've seen John Romita does as well, that might just be more of rough sort of forms of figures, basic shapes of space outlines, whether it's a room. So something like this, you might get the shapes of the three figures and, might be a little note that says, looking at slides, something like that. Maybe this other chair isn't there. Maybe the shading isn't laid out, so the inker then has to decide how they want to shadow things. That would be very common in a layout, and you would be paid less for doing layouts because you're technically doing less work. Then your inker, Jim Mooney, so here it's listed as illustration, which could reflect the fact that, yes, these are layouts, very rough drawings that Jim Mooney comes in and finishes and puts all the finishing details into when he inks them. Or it could just be, instead of calling him inker, they said illustration, and it's just Stan being clever with his wording. It's very possible. A finisher, someone that completes the artwork in the inks, as opposed to just turning the pencils into black and white art. A finisher is going to make more money than an inker, traditionally. So anyway, those things do make a difference. I don't have any documentation that says how the split was on this particular issue. Was John Romita doing layouts or finished pencils? I'm not sure, and I've never seen any of the original art from this, so it would be very difficult to tell. But overall, splash page, it's a good composition. It's something that breaks the norm. Normally, you would not want to have your characters with their back to us, the viewer, because you don't see their faces, and faces is what makes people recognizable. However, the Kingpin is a unique enough character that his body type and stature is so big. He's got this cigarette with the cigarette holder. It's pretty clear, even without the dialogue, that this is the Kingpin, and so you can get away with that. Other characters you would want, if this was an all-new character that we've never seen before, we might want to show his face first before introducing what they're looking at. But here, we can definitely go ahead and get away with it. I also noted in my notes, I noted that Stan is bringing the Kingpin back pretty quickly. So kind of pushing the Kingpin to sort of be a new arch enemy for Spidey. We've seen the Kingpin show up a lot lately. So originally there was Dr. Octopus was sort of Spidey's first major arch enemy. We haven't seen Doc Ock around in a very long time. You could argue maybe the Vulture. The Vulture has made a lot of appearances. And then, of course, we all today, if you said who is Spidey's number one enemy, you might say the Green Goblin. You should say the Green Goblin. Even newer people might say Venom, but the Green Goblin, right? But at this time, we've only seen the Green Goblin a handful of times. In his early appearances, he was sort of in and out, kind of behind the scenes a little more. And then eventually we have a big confrontation with him and Spidey, where Spidey finds out that he's Norman Osborn, and then within the next issue, he loses his memory, and then we haven't seen the Green Goblin for a long time. The Green Goblin will return. Norman has remembered that he is the Green Goblin, though he doesn't remember Spidey's secret identity at this point. But yeah, it seems like the Kingpin is really pushed as a major Spidey foe, and as a kid, I came in a little bit after this, but still, that was the case. Kingpin was a major Spider-Man villain, and it wasn't until much later that he ended up really cementing himself with Daredevil, as Frank Miller took over that book and pulled the Kingpin in as a more logical villain for Daredevil. The two of them just seem to really fit well together. So here we go. There's some stuff here that I like. There's very good dramatic lighting throughout. I mean, even from the splash page, they're looking at these slides, so it's projecting light away from them, so all the shadows in the back are really nice. Same thing here, very, very good. I do want to point out a couple of things here that I found very interesting. One, there's this little sparkle on the Kingpin's ring, and it doesn't need to be there in terms of the story, but it's a nice little touch that just helps us remember that this guy has this giant ring on his pinky finger and really selling, I guess, sort of the opulence or wealth of the Kingpin. So that's really interesting. The other thing that I noted here, which is very subtle, when you're drawing, if you're an artist and you're drawing comics, sometimes you want to include stuff in the background, and we as artists can get way too noodly, especially with today where folks are working digitally. You can zoom in to the level of individual pixels and start drawing that way. However, sometimes simpler is better. So for anybody who does not know what this device over here on the right is, this is called a slide projector. So if you're not familiar with what that is, slides are basically, you take a photograph and that photograph is printed instead of on a piece of paper, it's printed on a clear little piece of plastic that goes into this machine, drops down in front of a light bulb, and is projected through a lens onto a big screen. Like a movie, it just doesn't move. It's a single still image. And the circle part on the top holds a lot of slides, and usually you have a remote and you push a button and it cycles through them. So you look at picture after picture. But just simple things like a partial arc, a little black circle in the center, a rectangle, and these vertical lines tell me it's all I need to know that is a slide projector. I'm familiar with them, and all the key elements are there. There's a little projector lens out the front, that round kind of slide holder at the top, and the whole thing works perfectly. So sometimes less is more. Just hints of things. You don't have to draw every single little slot on this slide projector of where all the slides go. Just the hint of the shadow of that ring around the top works enough to sell it as a slide projector. So again, sometimes less is more. That's the point I'm making. Now, this other thing I want to talk about is this image over here of the Kingpin on the right. When I talk about dramatic lighting, this is extremely good dramatic lighting. The coloring also really helps to emphasize the dramatic lighting, which is cool. However, I do have some problems with this lighting from a realism point. However, this is important to note when all is said and done. I'll circle back around, trust me. So number one, you want to keep your lighting consistent whenever possible. And how do I know where the lighting is? So shadows, so the light is obviously going to be the opposite of the shadows. And you have to remember this is supposed to be a three-dimensional face. So you can actually do this. You can feel your own face. If you were to drop something straight down over your face, you're going to come around and you're going to find that things are going to stick out. Your eyebrows are going to stick out a little bit. Somebody like Kingpin, a little more. Some people a little less. But your eyebrows protrude out. If this is the starting plane of your forehead, your eyebrows come out. Your nose obviously is the thing that comes out the furthest. And then from there, your cheeks, maybe if you have very full cheeks, your cheeks might protrude further than here. Your lips actually come out and protrude, whether that both your top and bottom lip. And then depending on your chin, your structure, some people have a larger chin. Your chin may also come out. Everything that sticks out away from your face, if the light is above you, is going to catch light. And that's what we have in the eyebrows, the top of the head, the bottom lip here, the cheeks, even the wrinkles around the eyes are catching light from above. And we know that the top of his shoulders, top of the finger, we know that because the shadows are on the opposite side of these places. So you see his cheeks are he's grimacing, so the cheeks are puffed up. So that means there's a shadow underneath. The wrinkles of the eyes, as he's squinting his eyes, there are shadows underneath. The forehead, so we're assuming that the crown of his head, which is sort of this round part at the top, is jutting out a little further. So he's got not a solid shadow, a feathered shadow. So this is a transition from slightly darker to light and then back to light. Same thing on the side of the head, tilting away. So the light is coming from a different angle. That's fine. Underneath his bottom lip, you've got a large shadow there. Even on the finger, we've got some shadows. Even on this, on the fingernail, where it would curl under a little bit, we've got a shadow there. So everything, even his cigarette holder, the handle of that has a shadow on the bottom side. So the light is hitting it from the top. Here's where my problem is, where you go, this doesn't make sense, is this shadow on the nose. If his nose is the part of his body, or his face, that sticks out the furthest, that light is going to hit the bridge of his nose, and your nose is always going to be lit up. It's not going to be shadowed. There'd be nothing casting a shadow on the top of the nose. The light is hitting it. Your shadow would be deep underneath your nose, where it sticks out and shades itself. It casts a shadow underneath here. You could have this shadow if the light is coming from below. So if you ever look at, you can go online and Google this and find examples of faces with different lighting approaches, up, down, left, right, behind, all this kind of stuff. And if it's from below, the nose is going to shade itself. So all this underneath your nose, the tip and the under part of your nose is going to catch all the light, and it's going to shade above. So you would have a slight shadow over the bridge of your nose if the light is coming from below. But the light can't be coming from below, because then we wouldn't have all these shadows on the bottom. There wouldn't be shadows under the cheeks. They would be above, between the cheek and the eye. His eyebrow, this part wouldn't be lit up. The top of his brows would be very heavily shadowed, because the light would sort of catch where your eyebrows are at the bottom and wouldn't be lighting up the top part. Same here, that the top of his shoulders wouldn't be lit up. So, but here's where it works, and that is the drama of it. And this is the point I want to make. You can draw something that is 100% realistic, and that is perfectly fine, and it works great. Comics are obviously not 100% realistic. We have a man named Spider-Man who can cling to walls, can lift up cars, and can sense danger when it's coming. Clearly not reality. So when you draw something like this, you might add these kinds of shading or other elements that wouldn't be there in reality. But if they look cool, and I'm going to argue that this looks cool, then it works. It is not realistic. It is the symbol of drama. And that's what we're creating here with the coloring, the shading. Everything is creating a sense of drama and tension, even though it's not real. So just something to keep in mind. Again, if you are a young artist or a new artist and you're learning the techniques, just be sure if you're going to add shadows, you're doing it for a purpose. And in this case, it is to add to the drama. Kingpin is going to get ready to fight some dudes to work out. And he runs rampant on these guys, which is perfectly good. And realistically, this entire scene is nothing more than helping the readers who don't know the Kingpin or are new to understand that this guy could potentially, even though he's just a human being, go toe-to-toe with Spider-Man, because he trains really, really hard. And his size is not fat, it is muscle. And everybody confuses that, but he's far more powerful than everybody anticipates, because he's not just fat, he's muscle bound, essentially. So that's what we've got there. He fights good stuff there, nothing crazy. It's a pretty good action sequence. I would have liked bigger, I always say this, big panels for big action, but this isn't necessarily big action. Let's save that for when we have Spider-Man and the Kingpin confronting another. This can just be done to get through this training regiment, which is fine. However, I do have a question. As Kingpin walks out after this training, he's putting his robe back on, and he's standing next to the guy who works for him. Now, number one, what are the odds that the Kingpin, whose real name is Wilson Fisk, and I did go back and look, and I couldn't find, I may have missed it, but I couldn't find where he was identified as Wilson Fisk before, just the Kingpin. Yet here, he's hired a guy that he refers to as Wilson. So what are the odds that Wilson hired Wilson to be his like number one, go-to guy, his right-hand man? So that's kind of interesting. Number two, the Kingpin, according to Marvel lore, which I have actually in front of me here, I can't show you, but I have a copy, the Omnibus, which is the full collected edition of the Marvel official handbook of the Marvel Universe. It gives all the stats, all the info on all the characters as of that time. And at that time, the Kingpin was listed as 6'7", 450 pounds. Now, when you go back and you look at this, you go, sure, 6'7", 450 pounds. That's what I expect someone to look at like this guy could play in the NFL. He could be a offensive guard. He could be a defensive tackle. Like it, no problem. He's got the size, strength, and bulk and mass to do it, that he looks like that. So realistic, great. This guy is a half a step behind him and is yet almost a head taller. So is this dude like 7 feet tall? How tall is this guy Wilson if he's supposed to be 6'7"? So that's something to note. Again, as you're creating characters, make sure your scale is correct. If you have a character that's supposed to be very, very tall, make sure they're shown as very, very tall. Or if characters are supposed to be very short, don't put them eye to eye with characters that you know are very tall, right? I do like this. This is what I'm talking about when you say, like, this is more realistic lighting in terms of the Kingpin's face here. The light is obviously coming from the left of the panel across because we see the shadows on the right side of the face here. You can see the nose is doing exactly what I said, which is casting a shadow both down below and to the side. The bottom lip and chin is casting a big shadow, etc. So this is a more consistent lighting with what I would expect from a directional light, whereas the other one, again, was just for the element of drama. Oh yeah, one more thing here. I think this is something that I didn't think worked and I don't think was necessary. This kind of fade from a black background to this blue doesn't work well for me. The transition is not smooth, and part of it is because it's broken up by this white wisp of cigarette smoke. And so you can tell, I don't know if it's not a coloring issue. I mean, it could be, but so these lines are dipping into what is supposed to be this white streak. And my problem with that is now I don't know. It's just not clean. It doesn't work well. And the transition isn't good. This very little bit over here isn't as bad, but it just kind of goes from black to some lines on blue. It doesn't fade as well as it could because the smoke is in the way. Realistically, just make it a solid black background. You're not going to lose anything because you have this sort of secondary light on the side of the Kingpin's face. So the shadow comes across and maybe it's reflected light or just secondary light. Just go full black background and just do the white wisps of smoke, and then it's clean and you don't have to worry about it. So that's one where sometimes an artist, I'm assuming a Jim Mooney, the inker, would have chosen to do this. It's one of those deals where they sometimes get a little cute with the technique, and realistically, it's not necessary. So now we have Spidey. He's back from his last adventure. Now he doesn't say, it does say actually he defeated Mysterio. I added in the Spider-Man annual, so you could say maybe he's returning from that adventure. Either one is fine, but here's, he's coming back to town, heading back to his apartment. These are all terrific poses. This web swinging pose is great. Him trying to climb through the windows. I especially like this one as he's climbing through the window into the room. Just the angle of him and the weight moving through that space is really, really nice. But these are all great Spidey illustrations. And again, another note I made, lots of underarm webs in this issue. So Spidey, as you could tell from, like, this is a good example right here, over here on the left, bottom left. The webbing under his arms goes kind of from his waist to about just below his elbow, the middle of his forearm. I like it. I really do like it as an element of his costume. I think it's very unique. It's something that nobody else really has. And it's a nice visual presence. And sometimes it's hit or miss with some artists on whether they include it or not. And we've seen that in these issues. Obviously, Steve Ditko was a big proponent. It's part of his original design. Other artists have it's come and gone. But here we have it. It actually shows up a lot in this comic, which I enjoy. In terms of the story, we now go to college. This is where we see, again, Randy Robertson. So this is, I think, the second appearance of Randy. Randy is the son of the city editor for the Daily Bugle and is also a student at Empire State with Peter. So the two of them are introduced. We saw Randy talking to his dad, I think, in the previous issue. But this is the first time these two characters interact. And Randy does become a reoccurring character and a friend to Peter throughout the run of the title. So that's cool. Now we meet this other guy who is named Josh, and he's kind of the leader of this student body organization that's going to be protesting regarding student housing. That's what it's all about. And they're trying to get Peter to join in, and he's just not really sure if he wants to do that. Does he feel as passionate about this issue as they do? Gwen shows up, and they flirt, and everything's good. We cut over to the Daily Bugle, where we see, again, Joe Robertson is thinking about his son. J. Jonah Jameson is doing his usual screaming and yelling stuff and trying to get news. And so again, just a couple little bit to just remind us, hey, there's a pretty robust supporting cast, and we want to include them, which is what leads us here to seeing Aunt May. So Peter and Gwen show up, talk to Aunt May. Everybody gets the impression like, ooh, this relationship is getting a little serious, and Aunt May is happy because, of course, she wants to see Peter happy, and Gwen is a wonderful young woman, so she's happy. But as they leave, we find out that Aunt May is secretly sicker than she's letting on, but she didn't want them to know. So future plot thread that we can pull later, as Aunt May's health, of course, is always a roller coaster. Now we cut back to the next day. We've got more campus information, and now they're really going very heavy with the demonstration, which is okay. They're going to make some moves on it, and this is where things get a little tight about people disagreeing with should they, shouldn't they. Same thing over here, like how far are they going to take this? And again, as I mentioned, it gets into some political things of the time that I just personally don't want to dip into too far. But we see Peter goes inside to get away, and there's that stone tablet that the Kingpin is interested in, and it's being guarded by some guards here. And I do want to point this out, though. John Romita and Jim Mooney have done a very good job of creating a believable crowd of people several times. Over here, back over here, it's really hard. It's actually hard to explain why it's hard or why it's difficult to draw crowds. When you draw a comic, what Peter Parker looks like. You're going to draw Peter Parker 50 times an issue. You got it. Aunt May, there's a design out there. You can follow along. It's great. However, to come up with individual looks for 20 people, 30 people at random that you're never going to draw again, or very, very little, is surprisingly difficult. I always find myself thinking about people I know, looking at maybe magazines or photographs to try to just get ideas to make people unique, different clothing, different hairstyles, different facial features. it's actually surprisingly difficult. And the team does an awesome job here of doing that. So kudos to them. The Kingpin is going to take advantage of this demonstration by using it as a distraction so that him and his goons can get in and steal this tablet. No problem. The only thing there's a couple of things on this page that I want to point out. Again, things to maybe watch for, try to avoid within your own art if you're an artist. So Peter is here. He's upstairs in this building. The demonstration is going on outside, and he decides he's going to take some pictures because he's going to sell those for money. Makes perfect sense. I question the need for this panel right here. So what I mean by that is I read these comics. I tell you guys all the time. I read these comics 2 or 3 times. I just read them through. Then I sit down and read them again, take a page of notes that I want to cover to make sure I don't miss anything as we're talking. I had made notes that said, I want to talk about the car between this panel and this panel. And on my notes, I labeled them panels 2 and 3 because I literally missed this panel as I was just making my notes. It's squeezed in here. It's not necessary. You could take this exact same dialogue and you could just put his camera in his hand here in this main panel 1, and you could tell that he's going to take pictures, and that's fine. I don't know why we had to squeeze in this little panel of him taking pictures because it just gets lost. The dialogue feels like it all goes together. It's just unnecessary. And I hate to say it. Yes, it's a very small image. It's only a few inches high and a 2.5 inches wide, maybe at best. But use the real estate for something else. You only have a certain number of pages and a certain number of square inches to use in every comic. Don't add things you don't need. It's just extra work for you. And it doesn't really help the story along. Again, I put in a camera right here in his hand, and everything is hunky-dory, and I can completely remove this extra drawing. Now, I do want to talk about the car. So very important, the car pulls up. The Kingpin and his goons are there. We see the demonstration is there. The police are there forming a cordon around, trying to keep everything being calm. And Kingpin shows up. So we've got the grill of the car, the lights, so we know that this is the front. You can even kind of see the steering wheel here, the exhaust out the back. So we know they are heading in that direction. This is the front of the car, right? Now we cut here. We still see the demonstration going on in the background, but now we're seeing the other side of the car. And I know that because the front doesn't have fins. There's no grill. And this looks like a gas cap, which isn't on the front fender, would be on the rear fender of the car. So all of a sudden between panel 3 and panel 4, either we have changed direction, but that doesn't make sense because the demonstration is still over here to the on the other side of the car. So somehow the car has flipped from panel to panel. Now, is this a big deal? No. Would most people glaze over this and never notice that detail? Probably. But it also doesn't make any sense to not be consistent with it. You're drawing it. You might as well draw it right. And then somebody like me doesn't pick it apart and point it out. So anyway, just a note there on that one. Now, one more thing on this page, and we'll be moving on, and that is you have to consider perspective when you are drawing your figures on the page. How does that work? So remember, perspective is the study, if you will, or the art of creating the illusion of things moving through space on a 2-dimensional surface. So think of the prime example, a building, so we have their skyscraper. One side is going to come kind of to us. The other side is going to fade away. And as it fades away, it goes further in the distance. It gets smaller until it goes to what's called a vanishing point. Everything goes back to 1, 2, or sometimes 3 vanishing points. So like this building right here is great. The wall, the rock wall, the building goes down in perspective. It follows pretty well with these other lines. So that part is good. Your figures also have to follow the same rules, which is things that are closer are going to be bigger. As they get smaller, they're going to go away. And if you want things to line up so that if the person closest to us is, let's pretend, 6 feet tall, and the person a little bit further is also 6 feet tall, then the person who's slightly further away, even though both characters are supposed to be the same size, will be slightly smaller because they're further away. That's just perspective. So what we've got here is these chin, like his chin, if you turn this guy's head, his chin and kind of the Kingpin's chin are sort of in line, which doesn't work because if you were to draw through this, pretend that this is blank paper below, and you were going to go, I'm going to draw the Kingpin's legs, the rest of his legs. So it would come down, his knees might be there, his shins, his shoes. His bottom of his legs might be somewhere in this range, which would line up with the bottom of the tire of the car, and that's all to scale, and that works pretty well. However, this guy, if you draw this guy, he's off the page. Like his waist is maybe here, the bottom of this shape that I just kind of drew, this blue shape, like kind of at this explosion. So this guy's rest of his body is way off the page. So for him to be standing and their heads being almost the same height, this guy's in a giant hole or downstairs or something, like, which we don't see in the image, so I don't believe that's the case. So why is this guy in a hole? He should be, realistically, you wouldn't see his head here. Or it would be, maybe just the top of his head way up high. It doesn't work. He's way too short. So that's just something to be cautious of. Again, are most folks going to notice? Probably not. But when you start breaking it down, it's pretty quickly you realize, like, wait, something is wrong with this figure right here because he shouldn't be that size in comparison to everybody else. Interesting to see the Kingpin getting his hands dirty. We don't see that too often. And here he is just charging in like a bull, knocking doors off their hinges, kind of roughing up students, including Peter. So that's kind of interesting that he would be that sort of hands-on villain. It's definitely not the progression of the character, let's put it that way. And of course, he pushes Peter, who has to pretend he's a nobody. He's just a regular dude, but the Kingpin senses something about him. I always think that's very funny. This is a great expression. I do really like this. I do want to talk about this one a little bit because I think there's some things here we can learn. Great expression on Peter's face. Angry, but worried, anxious at the same time. But what I really like about it the most is this shadow that separates the wall that he's hiding behind and his face. It would be very easy to not include that shadow, but then you don't have the depth that's created here. There is definitely a gap between this wall and Peter, and that shadow helps create that gap. Whereas without it, it might look like he's literally resting his chin on the wall. So that's something to just note, and a very subtle little thing, but those kinds of shadows, those cast shadows, can really help give your art a sense of depth that it wouldn't have otherwise. Of course, Peter changes, and it's time for Spidey to get involved. And I really like this swinging pose. This one is excellent. He's swinging over the crowd of demonstrators, protesters, to get to Kingpin and his gang. And the view that we've used here puts us in the crowd. So we, as the reader, are looking up at Spidey as he's swinging over the top of us. We are one of these people. And I think that's a really good idea. It's very powerful. It's great storytelling. We could be a third party observing, like we are in any of these other panels. Like right here, this is Spidey. We just happen to be behind him. We see the stairs. We see the protesters. We are a observer. In this case, now visually, we have been pulled into the story as we see what the students see as Spidey swings over the top of them. So that's a really nice touch and a great bit of visual storytelling, and something that for me personally, I find myself going, ooh, I want to keep that in mind because that's a great tool to use. We see Spidey catches up. Kingpin and his goons are, I was going to say his dudes. His goons are using gas to knock out the security, but Spidey's going to not let that stop him. Nice pose here of Spidey creeping up along the wall. Very nice body pose there. I always love when he's sticking to a wall, when you spread those hands out, because again, it emphasizes he's using his fingertips, he's not flat palming a wall. He's doing this, which I think is a very nice subtle touch. Same, he's also on his toes. Nice. It just gives him a sense of bounce and energy, like he could jump off that wall. If he's flat-footed or flat-handed on it, it gives more of a sense of stability as opposed to somebody that's about to leap into action. So Spidey jumps in, knocks a bunch of guys down, and appears to be unconscious because the only guy who gets up to fight is the Kingpin. And then this, I love this. It cracked me up. I was like, this is amazing. Spidey grabs one of the guys that he knocks out, and as the Kingpin charges him, Spidey literally hits him with another human being. How awesome is that? We forget sometimes that Spider-Man is so strong. Again, he can lift cars and buses over his head. So to grab another human being that's maybe, 180, 200 pound guy, adult male, and swing him like a toy and then hit another person with him is just absolutely cracked me up when I saw it. I don't know if that would have been in the script itself or that's just some business that John Romita and Jim Mooney added from an art perspective. But man, anytime you can do something like that with your storytelling where you're bringing in a very fun and unique visual, absolutely do it. Kingpin gets Spidey in his bear hug, which again would have, as they say here in the dialogue, would have rendered a normal person unconscious, but Spidey, of course, is super strong, so he's just kind of playing possum before he, tries to get the drop on the Kingpin. Randy jumps in and gets himself slammed into a wall for his trouble, and then Spidey's like, okay, can't wait, time to go to town. And this montage of Spidey punching the Kingpin is awesome. Normally, I do talk about it all the time. Big panels for big action. You could have broken out each one of these into its own panel, but to be honest, what I like about the montage is it emphasizes what's in the narration here, and that is that Spider-Man is doing this fast. They use the term machine gun speed, so these are blow after blow after blow after blow without a breath, so that the Kingpin has no chance to gather himself and counterattack. So boom, 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 really nice, and that's a great way to create that pace visually. So really nice stuff there. Spidey goes to check on Randy, and the Kingpin blasts the wall behind him, and it collapses on Spidey. Now, this is one of those times when I question if the artwork and the dialogue kind of go together. I've been back and forth on this a little bit. Spidey ducks out of the way of the Kingpin's blast, and we can see cracks in the wall. Then he swings over to scoop up Randy, and he's swinging away. He's swinging up and away. That's what the motion lines are telling us. But he's saying, oh, we're not going to get away in time. I'll shield him with my body. It makes me wonder if maybe the dialogue, again, doesn't fit. That Spidey planned to get away, could swing away with Randy to safety, and then the wall just collapsed on him, and he does end up shielding Randy with his body from the rubble. But I don't know that that was the plan. Otherwise, why wouldn't you draw Spidey sort of, crouching like, okay, I'm going to protect you. Why attempt to swing if you know you can't swing away? So I'm not sure, again, if the dialogue matches what the original intent of the art was. But that's just pure speculation there. I do also want to point out this is some great rubble. And you may go, wow, Jerry, that is some minutia. You're excited about the rubble. I am, because I've drawn rubble before, and it's another thing that, again, can be very difficult to draw depending on the material, and you want to take that in consideration. Things like rock and brick, concrete and stone have a different shape compared to metal, like steel girders, glass, things of that nature, right? So with this kind of rubble, one of the things that is hard is to add enough detail so that you can see bits and pieces, but not every single bit and piece. We're not getting into that kind of level. So there's just a few places there's some shadows and kind of dashes of ink. And then the other part is keeping it all organic and unique. It's very easy to find yourself getting into a pattern without realizing it, of repeating shapes or repeating sizes. And if you want your rubble to really look organic and real, you have to work very hard to alternate and change up, again, the sizes and shapes. And they've done a nice job there. So Kingpin gets away. The students are being arrested because the police believe they were involved in this robbery, which of course they're not, but that'll all get cleared up. And then Spidey checking to make sure everybody's okay, and then he's going to chase after the Kingpin. And again, this nice idea of he's looking around a wall, so we're going to cast that shadow between the wall and him, really sets him apart. His chest isn't pressed up against that edge of the wall. There's distance between the two, which I very, very much appreciate. And then a nice little swinging pose of Spidey taking off to capture the Kingpin. So, or at least go after him. We'll assume. He's a good guy. He always wins, right? But yeah, that's the story, and a fun one. And so let's head over to the desk and let's wrap everything up on this video. So there's Amazing Spider-Man 68. It's a pretty fun read. And even though it doesn't have a ton of action, it's kind of bookended. You've got a little bit in the first part with the Kingpin doing his training. And then at the end with Spidey and Kingpin fight is very, very fast. I'm very much looking for the setup, or for the conclusion. This is the setup, the conclusion to this story arc, to see maybe a really nice Spidey Kingpin conflict that we could get some really great action out of. So looking forward to that very much. We did get to see some of the supporting cast. We've seen some slice of life of what Peter's life is like, so that's pretty cool. Overall, for a rating, I would give this one a 7.5 out of 10. I think there's some really great artwork there. There's some very nice shading. Talked about lighting for drama. There's a few things that could be done a little bit different. Like I mentioned, the perspective where the guy's standing in a hole. So be it. Again, doesn't take away from the story. Just stuff that, for me, because of what we're doing here, I'm pointing out because, again, I'm going through this with a fine-tooth comb. But overall, very good issue. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I hope you enjoyed it. If this is one you haven't read before, I hope you enjoyed going through it with me very quickly as we dig into the artwork that made up Amazing Spider-Man 68. So thank you so much. Please give me a like and subscribe if you're enjoying what we're doing here. And don't forget to click the notification button, because you're going to want to know when the next video comes out next week, right here, same place, same time, for even more Amazing Spider-Man. Thanks.